premise. I'm not a surf foiler, I'm not a downwind foiler, I'm not a surfer, I'm not a wing foiler, I'm just an average pump foiler who is getting into wave riding from flat water pumping. And if you're in the same journey, maybe you can watch this video and find some valuable tips. However, since I'm at the beginning, this is going to be more sharing my journey and my findings rather than just do this because this is how you do it and listen to me because I'm the authority. No, not at all. But yeah, so take my advice here with a grain of salt and let's get into it. The first topic that I'm going to cover is the foil choice and actually all the airplane, all the gear. So which gear should you use if you're getting from flat water pumping into wave riding or wake tipping? So first of all, it's going to depend on a lot of different factors. First of all, how far are the waves from your starting point? Because that's quite a barrier, right? If you have to pump out 500 meters to get to catch the wave of the boat or the actual wave, then that's going to be, again, an influencing factor in the foil choice. However, imagining talking about like a perfect case scenario like I have here, we don't have often waves, but when we do have waves, I really have to pump probably 100-ish meters to get to the waves, and then I'm pretty much off. So this is the ideal scenario, and I can pick pretty much the smallest foil I can comfortably start in not super quiet conditions. And it's a 1250 Karve from Ketos. So it's a surf foil, wing foil foil. And I absolutely love it because I used to use the 1450 again from Ketos, the Karve, and it was fine. It was of course easier to start. However, I could even rock start it. However, the problem was that not only I was breaching a lot, because if you're experienced, at the end of the day, you can control, you can prevent the foil from breaching, and I'm going to touch on that in the next chapters. However, the biggest problem was pumping against the waves. Even though it's quite thin, still because of the quite big area, surface area, you can still feel that it's not that easy to pump against the waves, especially if it's messy waters and you don't have these clean waves like maybe you have in Bali or whatever. It was kind of hard to pump against the waves in messy water. You have so many forces and you need to be quite balanced and you need to have speed. But again, that's something for another chapter. So I would really stick to the smallest foil that you can get. Because for example, now with the 1250, you might say, well, 200 square centimeters different is not going to make that big of a difference. But actually, it's also thinner. And that's probably, in my opinion, the biggest difference when it comes to choosing a foil that you can pump to connect waves, to connect multiple waves, or to pump out and then ride waves. Because again, if water is messy, you need something that cuts through the chop, and you need something thin, you need something fast. So that's pretty much my foil choice, my front wing choice. And then the first times I went out, I was using the shortest fuse I had and the smallest stab I had, and it was a disaster. It was very, very difficult to stay on the wave, to stay on the right spot on the wave with the right angle, to not tilt the board too much. And if you are just getting started, and probably even actually down the line, why would you bother with such a short fuse if it's not just flat water? Then I would get something quite generous. That's why usually when I'm wave riding, I have a longer fuse from Ketos, and it's just lovely because the front wing is super close still to the mast. So even if you're riding not super small foils, you still have this carvy feeling. You're still super connected with the foil, and you can turn it immediately, especially if you're using a small board and not necessarily a prone foil board. And the tail also, I was using this 130, which you cannot really see, but the small one, more high aspect. And then I switched to the 150, which is slightly thicker, is less high aspect, is lower aspect, and is also a little bit further towards the back, probably 3-4 centimeters further towards the back. So it's almost like it lengthened the fuselage a bit more. And when I picked that set and I paired it with the Karve 1250, I absolutely fell in love again with not too short fuselages. Right? If it's flat water and I'm with a big front wing, then yes, 100% I would choose something a little bit smaller in terms of stab and Fuselage, but for wave riding, oh my god, it's game changer, because suddenly you're still able to accelerate, to pump out, but then once you're on the wave, it's much more intuitive and you have to be less precise. I mean, you don't necessarily to be as precise as you have to be with a super short fuse and smaller stub. So overall, you enjoy way better the waves with a more generous stabilizer and fuselage. So consider that if you're getting into it. Then the second thing that I want to talk about is actually where to stay on the wave, because this is really actually the most important part when it comes to wave riding. The first times, and actually at the beginning of the previous week, I was still struggling. I was getting on the wave, and then I wasn't really feeling any push, because the thing is that you shouldn't glide until you really feel that the wave is pushing you. But you cannot really feel the push if you're not in the right spot on the wave. And again, I'm not an expert, but from what I've heard, from what people told me by looking at and reviewing my videos, they told me that I should stay a bit higher on the wave and higher on the mast, because not because of the drag, but because of where the power of the wave is. And the power of the wave, the push, is pretty much on top of the wave. So the difficulty, actually the most probably difficult part of wave riding is staying in the right spot of the wave, staying high enough on the mast and keep it there without breaching. Because it happened multiple times that I breached, and when I breached, then probably the following launch, I'm kind of playing it safe. So as soon as I feel some push, I move my weight, I shift my weight towards the front, towards the nose, to keep the board down and not make it rise too much, but you kind of lose all the speed that the wave is kind of giving you. So there is probably not a shortcut. You just need to practice, and one drill that maybe could help with this is to try and pump in flat water if you don't have always wave like I do, but to really try and pump using 20 centimeters, the last 20 centimeters of the mast. If you really understand how to stay super high on the mast and you understand where you are on the mast without looking at the water, that's key. Because another point is that you're gonna be like, a lot of things are going on. You're gonna be pushed. Maybe it's windy. You need to look for the next wave. What to do next? You need to stay balanced, you need to keep the speed and everything, but like so many things are happening, so you need to understand how high you are on the mast without looking at the water, because you look at the water and you're down pretty much. So you really need to develop that sensitivity to be able to understand again where are you on the mast, where you are on the mast. And that was my second tip. My third tip is speed. Another mistake that I'm still doing is that either I get on the wave without enough speed, either I get out of the wave again with a low speed. And this makes it extremely hard to then pump out. Because if you're getting out of a wave, then you need to kind of get past it to get maybe the one behind. The problem is that if you're pushed when you're on the wave, on top of the wave, you're kind of sucked when you are behind the wave. So you need to have speed in order to overtake this behind the wave part. Because again, you also have to consider that maybe you're carving, you're making this turn to go past the wave, and then you kind of have to be straight and to stop pumping when you pass the wave, right? So that then you can keep pumping and you can be efficient. Because if you just try and pump while you overtake the wave, while you go against the wave, it's just going to be absolutely useless. You just have to generate speed first, and then kind of glide, and maybe kind of copy the wave to keep the foil in the water and not breach. And then after the wave passes you, then you can pump out again. Again, the problem is that you need to exit the wave with some speed, because if you don't have speed when you exit the wave, because maybe you did some mistakes when you were riding the wave, it's going to be extremely hard to get that speed back and that height back maybe before the wave passes you. So you need to really preserve the speed all the time. And even if you are on the wave, if you lose the speed and you lose height, it's going to be hard to really, again, get the foil into that sweet spot where it gets pushed. So that's another point that you should really, really consider. And I believe it's just a matter of practicing. Probably the way you can practice that in flat water is to just, again, pop your small foil. Of course, you need to get used to that small foil that you're going to use in waves, but pop a small foil and just try and carve, try and make these sharp carves, and to try and keep the speed there in these carves, because that's pretty much at the end of the day what you have to do on the wave. You need to stay in the right spot on the wave, and then preserve this speed all the time, so that you can exit the wave with some speed. And the last tip I want to share, the last thing that I understood, is to not chill out too much. What do I mean by that? As you could see from the footage, these are not clean waves. These are just messy waves from onshore wind, so these are just messy waves, right? If you are on a clean wave, like you can stay on the wave. Actually, probably you should stay on the wave so that you can spend more time on the wave with a single wave, and you can really better understand how the foil behaves, where the power is, how to keep the speed, and all the things that we discussed until this point. But if you are maybe downwinding, or the waves are not clean at all, they're just windy waves, like just the wind moving masses of water, then in that case you should really, as soon as you're on the wave, as soon as you're in the sweet spot on the wave and you can rest for a couple of seconds, then already look for the next one. And connected to this little tip is don't choose the wave in front, right? Maybe it's not the best tip, I don't know, because I hear, I don't know, maybe some downwind foilers suggest to always look for the wave in front, I don't know. But I personally in this case found better to look for the wave behind, because again, remember what I said a couple of minutes ago, behind the wave there is this spot where it's impossible to pump. So if you try to overtake the wave in front of you, you're gonna have to pass this barrier, this no pump zone, let's call it, and it's gonna be quite difficult. So it's just best to keep the speed and to look how the wave behind you is, so that zoom, you can exit the wave in front with some speed, and then you can let the wave that you are riding at the moment pass you and find the one behind. Because if you're on top of the wave and you turn right away, it's not gonna work, because you're gonna breach for sure. You have to exit the wave with speed, turn, and then pass the wave that you're currently riding. So try that, and hopefully these tips are somehow helpful. Hopefully you can actually manage to find waves. But yeah, it's gonna get summer, so maybe you're gonna be able to fly somewhere, or to go somewhere on vacation where you can actually find some waves. And yeah, again, don't just watch this video. This was just sharing my journey and inspire you, so that maybe you get into it. Really, you find the confidence to get into it. And maybe you can watch other videos from other creators, which I haven't watched. So maybe you can, so that you can gather some more information before you actually get into this journey. And the other thing is try and play it safe. If you have a pump board, and if you don't have a foil drive or a big board that you can start in the water, then play it safe and just do short runs, because if you just go far, you're just gonna get stressed and you're gonna fall because you're stressed, not really because you make mistakes. I mean, you're gonna make more mistakes because you're stressed. That's really the point. So yeah, that's that. Play it safe. And again, here I talked about mainly dockstart-to-waves, but again, if you have to be completely transparent, that's probably not the best, easiest way to learn wave riding. Because if you have a wing, then you can pretty much flap the wing and then ride the wave when you are already on the wave. Okay, you have something in your hands, okay, you have a big board, but this is going to be more accessible to get into it, because you don't have to be a sharp pump foiler to start a small foil and then pump out and then actually get on the wave this way. Same if you have foil drive, you're going to be on the wave even without knowing how to wing foil and everything, maybe even with a small foil and a small board. So there are shortcuts, but this was again the hard way, because I like the hard way. Actually, if you are a professional pump foiler and you are not into wing foiling like I am, then it's actually the easiest bit, the easiest part, the easiest way to get into it if you can find a dock and ride waves. I'm not going to necessarily share the position where I'm at. First of all, because we get really one good day probably out of 7 in winter. In summer, it's completely different. You have a completely different wind direction, completely different waves. So if I'm not sharing my position, it's not because I'm a piece of crap. I'm just because it's not worth it, right? I don't want you to come here and then be disappointed. So pretty much find a place. I'm pretty sure you can find better places. I know that Yvonne is always going to Zarauz. I don't know that place in Spain, I think, and that's pretty much a pretty good spot. I would say I heard to do this dock start to wave training. So that's that. I hope this was somehow valuable and not too boring. I hope you learned something. I hope I inspired you a bit to get into it, and it's actually absolutely achievable, and it's so much more fun than pumping in flat water, for me at least, right? Which I'm not necessarily a long distance guy. All right, thank you, and I will see you in the next one.